the day my father chose my older brother to take over our family business. I smiled, shook his hand, and told him he deserved it. 3 months later, my phone rang. It was my father. For the first time in my life, I heard him crying. He only said one sentence. "Emily?" I made the biggest mistake of my life. "Hi, my name is Emily. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio, with my husband Michael and our 8-year-old daughter Sophie. For the last 12 years, I have worked at Carter Furniture, the business my father built, from a tiny workshop into one of the most trusted furniture stores in our city. My father, Richard, is 66 years old. He's the kind of man who believes a person's reputation is more valuable than money. Growing up, everyone respected him, not because he was wealthy, but because he always kept his word. If Dad promised something, people knew he would follow through. I always admired that about him. My mother, Linda, has always been the quiet one in our family. She avoids arguments whenever she can and usually lets my father make the important decisions. She loves both of her children equally, but she's also the type of person who believes it's better to keep the peace than challenge someone's opinion. Then there's my older brother, Daniel. Daniel is 38, 4 years older than me. He's outgoing, confident, and incredibly charming. He can walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 5 new friends. But if there's one thing Daniel has never been good at, it's commitment. Over the years, he worked in real estate, sold cars, tried insurance, and even opened a small coffee shop that closed before its first anniversary. Every time something became difficult, he convinced himself the problem was the job, not him. Despite that, we always had a decent relationship. We weren't the kind of siblings who talked every day, but we celebrated birthdays together, spent holidays as a family, and never had any major fights. At least, not until everything changed. Unlike Daniel, I never wanted to work anywhere else. After graduating with a degree in business administration, I came straight back to Carter Furniture. I started at the bottom. I helped unload delivery trucks. I worked the cash register. I answered customer calls. I learned inventory management, accounting, purchasing, and employee scheduling. My father never gave me special treatment just because I was his daughter. In fact, he was harder on me than anyone else. At the time, I thought he was preparing me to lead the business one day. And honestly, I didn't mind, because I loved every part of it. Over the years, our employees became like family. Mr. Harris, our warehouse manager, had been with my father for almost 30 years. Sarah, who worked in customer service, always joked that I knew every product in the showroom better than the sales team. Even our suppliers usually called me first whenever there was an issue. Little by little, people naturally started coming to me whenever they needed a decision, not because I was the boss, but because they trusted me. Looking back now, maybe that was the moment I started believing something that was never actually promised. I believed that one day, when my father retired, I'd be the one standing in his place. I had no idea that my father had already made a very different decision, and that decision would change our family forever. A few weeks after my father announced he was retiring, he called me one evening. "Emily, can you come over to the house this Sunday? I want the whole family here. There's something important we need to discuss." I didn't think much of it. In fact, I was excited. For years, people had been asking Dad when he planned to retire. Even our employees joked that he loved the business too much to ever leave it. So when he finally decided the time had come, I honestly believed this family meeting was simply a formality. That entire week, I found myself thinking about the future, not because I was dreaming about becoming the owner, but because I was already planning improvements. I wanted to renovate the showroom, expand our online business, modernize our inventory system. I'd spent years writing ideas in a notebook, hoping that one day I'd have the chance to put them into action. Sunday finally arrived. My husband, Michael, noticed how nervous I was while getting ready. "You've barely touched your breakfast," he said with a smile. "I know," I laughed. "I guess I'm just anxious." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You've worked harder than anyone for that business. Whatever happens today, be proud of yourself." His words stayed with me the entire drive. When we arrived at my parents' house, everyone was already there. My mother was setting food on the dining table. Daniel was sitting comfortably in the living room, scrolling through his phone. He looked unusually relaxed. My Aunt Carol and Uncle James had also been invited. That surprised me. I wasn't sure why this needed such a big audience. After lunch, Dad stood up. He looked around the room before clearing his throat. "I've been thinking about this for a long time," he began. "I've given 40 years of my life to Carter Furniture, and I think it's finally time for me to step away." Everyone nodded. "I couldn't have built this business without all of you." He smiled at my mother. Then he looked at me. "For years, Emily has worked incredibly hard." My heart started beating faster. She's sacrificed weekends, holidays, and countless late nights. I looked down, embarrassed by the praise. Then he continued, "And Daniel," he turned toward my brother, "you've always been my firstborn." Daniel straightened in his chair. Dad took a deep breath. "After a lot of thought, I've decided that Daniel will take over Carter Furniture." The room immediately filled with applause. My aunt smiled. "Congratulations." Mom hugged Daniel. Even Uncle James patted him on the back. I just sat there, smiling, trying to process what I'd just heard. Dad finally looked at me. "Emily, I know this might be disappointing." I forced myself to smile. "It's okay, Dad." He shook his head. "No, listen. You've been the backbone of this company. Nobody can replace what you've done." "Then why?" I asked quietly. The room became silent. Dad hesitated before answering. "Because I've always believed that a family business should be passed from father to son." Nobody argued. Nobody questioned him. Not even my mother. Daniel looked uncomfortable. For a moment, I almost expected him to say something, to tell Dad that I deserved it more. Instead, he simply nodded. "I won't let you down." Those 5 words hurt more than Dad's decision, because Daniel accepted a position he knew he hadn't earned. I stood up, walked over to him, and hugged him. "Congratulations," I said. "I hope you do well." Everyone smiled. They probably thought I had accepted the decision. What they didn't realize was that something inside me had quietly changed forever. As Michael and I drove home that evening, neither of us spoke for almost 10 minutes. Finally, he broke the silence. "So, what are you going to do now?" I looked out the window, watching the city lights blur together. Then I answered with the hardest sentence I'd ever said. "I don't think I can keep working there anymore." The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For 12 years, my routine had never changed. I'd make coffee, check my emails before breakfast, and leave the house by 7:30 so I could open the store before everyone else arrived. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my coffee, wondering if I even wanted to go. Michael noticed before I said a word. "You don't have to force yourself," he said gently. "I know, but I owe Dad a proper conversation." He nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you." That simple sentence gave me more comfort than he probably realized. When I arrived at Carter Furniture, everything looked exactly the same. The showroom lights were already on. Customers were walking through the displays. Mr. Harris was unloading a delivery truck. Sarah was arranging new catalogs near the entrance. It looked like any other Monday. Only, it didn't feel like home anymore. As I walked toward my office, several employees congratulated Daniel. He was standing near Dad's office, wearing a brand new suit I'd never seen before. For the first time, He looked like the boss. He smiled when he saw me. Morning. Morning. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then he spoke. I know yesterday wasn't easy. I nodded. It wasn't. I hope this doesn't change anything between us. I wanted to believe him. I hope so too. Before either of us could continue, Dad called us into his office. He looked exhausted. I've been thinking all night, he admitted. I don't want this family to fall apart because of one decision. Neither Daniel nor I responded. Dad looked at me. Emily, I still need you here. You know this business better than anyone. I want you to stay. I took a deep breath. I appreciate that, but I can't. His face fell. Why not? Because every decision I make from now on will belong to someone else. I looked at Daniel, and that's not fair to either of us. The room became silent. I'll always respect you, Dad, but I need a fresh start. Slowly, I placed my resignation letter on his desk. He stared at it for several seconds without touching it. I never thought today would end like this. Neither did I. An hour later, I packed the last few things from my office. A small framed photo of our family standing in front of the store on its 20th anniversary. A notebook filled with ideas I'd collected over the years. A coffee mug Sarah had given me for Christmas. Mr. Harris walked in quietly. You're really leaving? I smiled. I think it's time. He shook his head. This place won't be the same. Before I could answer, Sarah stepped into the room. Then another employee, and another. Within minutes, almost everyone from the office had gathered outside my door. One by one, they hugged me. Some wished me luck. Others simply thanked me for everything I taught them. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. Not because I was leaving a job, but because I was leaving people who had become family. That evening, after dinner, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Hi, is this Emily Carter? Yes. My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm the operations director at Heritage Home Furniture. I heard you're leaving Carter Furniture. I'd like to meet with you. I was surprised. I didn't even know you knew who I was. She laughed softly. Emily, in this industry, people know exactly who keeps a business running. 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. It wasn't just a better salary. For the first time in years, someone wasn't offering me a job because I was Richard Carter's daughter. They were offering it because of my experience. Meanwhile, back at Carter Furniture, Daniel was discovering something no one had warned him about. Owning a business wasn't about sitting in Dad's office. It was about solving problems before they became disasters. And unfortunately, the problems had already started. Starting my new job felt strange at first. For 12 years, I had walked into the same building, greeted the same people, and solved the same kinds of problems every day. Now everything was different. New office, new coworkers, new systems. But one thing surprised me. Nobody treated me like the boss's daughter. I was simply Emily. And honestly, that felt refreshing. During my second week, Rebecca, the operations director, invited me into her office. I've been hearing good things about you, she said with a smile. Our warehouse manager says you've already reorganized the inventory process. I laughed. I just noticed a few things that could save everyone time. She nodded. That's exactly why we hired you. For the first time in months, I felt appreciated. Not because of my last name, but because of my work. Meanwhile, things at Carter Furniture weren't going as smoothly. I only found out because Sarah called me one evening. I hope I'm not bothering you. Not at all, I replied. How's everyone doing? There was a long pause. It's different. What do you mean? Daniel wants to do everything his own way. I listened quietly. He replaced our delivery schedule because he thought it was outdated. Now trucks are arriving at the same time, and the warehouse can't keep up. He also switched suppliers without talking to anyone. Some of our best-selling products have been delayed for weeks. I frowned. Has Dad said anything? He's trying not to interfere. That sounded exactly like my father. He had handed Daniel the responsibility. Now he wanted to prove he trusted him. A few days later, Mr. Harris called. I hadn't expected that. I need your advice, he admitted. I don't work there anymore. I know, but you've seen this before. He explained that Daniel had started making decisions without asking department managers. Employees who had worked there for decades suddenly felt like their opinions no longer mattered. People are frustrated, Mr. Harris said. They're not angry. They just don't feel heard. I felt sorry for everyone involved, especially Daniel, because I knew exactly what he was trying to do. He wanted to prove he deserved the position. The problem was, he thought changing everything would make him look like a strong leader. Instead, it was creating confusion. Weeks passed. Then another phone call came. This time, it was my mother. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. How are you? I'm doing well. She hesitated. Your father isn't sleeping much. My heart sank. What happened? The business has been struggling. Nothing disastrous, she said quickly, but sales have slowed. A few longtime customers have started buying elsewhere. And last week, she stopped talking. What happened last week? 2 employees resigned. I closed my eyes. Who? Sarah and Mr. Harris. That hurt more than I expected. Those 2 people had spent years helping my father build that business. If they had decided to leave, things were worse than anyone wanted to admit. I think your father misses you, Mom whispered. I didn't answer, because I already knew. But missing someone and admitting you made the wrong decision were 2 completely different things. That Friday evening, after finishing work, I walked to my car. As I reached for the door, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. He hadn't called me since the day I resigned. I took a deep breath and answered, Hi, Dad. There was silence. Then I heard something I'd never heard before. He sounded tired, older, almost defeated. Emily, can we meet tomorrow? The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. For some reason, I felt nervous. Not because I was afraid of seeing my father, but because I didn't know what version of him I was about to meet. The proud businessman who always believed he was right, or the father who had asked to see his daughter. When I arrived, he was already sitting on the back porch with 2 cups of coffee. He smiled when he saw me. It was a tired smile, the kind that only comes after weeks of carrying something too heavy. Thanks for coming. Of course. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. We simply sat there, watching the trees move in the morning breeze. Finally, Dad broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot these past 3 months. I nodded but didn't interrupt. When you left, I told myself the business would be fine. I thought Daniel just needed time. He looked down at his coffee. But I was wrong. His voice cracked. I confused being my son with being the right person for the job. Hearing those words caught me off guard. For months, I had imagined this conversation. I thought I'd feel angry, maybe even satisfied. Instead, I just felt sad. Dad continued. Daniel isn't a bad man. No, he's trying. I know. But trying isn't always enough. He looked at me. I finally realized something. I spent years teaching you how to run this business, but when it came time to choose, I ignored everything you'd proven. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. Then he said the words I never expected to hear. I'm sorry. It wasn't a long apology. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. And somehow, that made it mean even more. A few minutes later, Daniel walked onto the porch. He looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were red. I wasn't sure you'd come, he admitted. I almost didn't. He nodded. I don't blame you. He sat across from us. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then he looked directly at me. I owe you an apology, too. I stayed quiet. I thought being the owner meant sitting behind Dad's desk and making decisions. He gave a small laugh. I had no idea how much you were actually doing. He rubbed his forehead. Every day, I ran into another problem. Employees had questions I couldn't answer. Suppliers asked about contracts I had never seen. Customers expected promises I didn't even know existed. I kept thinking, why did Emily make this look so easy? His voice became softer. Because you were doing all the hard work long before anyone noticed. For the first time in months, I saw my brother without pride, without excuses, just honest. Dad took a deep breath. I want you to come back. I'd like you to lead Carter Furniture. Before either of them could say another word, I answered. No. Both of them looked surprised. I appreciate what you're saying. And your apology means more than you know. But I spent the last 3 months rebuilding my confidence. I finally work somewhere people see me for my ability, not because I'm your daughter. Dad slowly nodded. I understand. I don't want to lose our relationship again. I reached across the table and held his hand. You won't. I'll always be your daughter. But I don't need to run the business to prove my worth. Dad smiled through tears. I think that's the smartest thing you've ever said. A week later, Dad surprised everyone. Instead of choosing one child over the other, he hired an experienced general manager from outside the family. Daniel stayed with the company, but this time he started learning from the ground up, not as the owner, as someone willing to earn people's trust. Months later, Daniel called me. You were right. I laughed. I don't remember saying anything. You didn't. But you showed me. Today, our family dinners are different. We don't talk about who should have inherited the business. We talk about our children, our lives, and the mistakes that taught us the biggest lessons. As for me, I still visit Carter Furniture every now and then, not as an employee, not as the future owner, just as a daughter who's finally at peace with the past. Sometimes life doesn't reward you the moment you deserve it. Sometimes the greatest reward is walking away from a place that stopped valuing you and discovering your worth was never tied to it in the first place.